Hi, everybody, and welcome to our training. We're going to be talking about normal sexual development and behavior with foster care youth. I'm Rob.
Hi, I'm Shamika.
All right. So what we're going to do is just have this PowerPoint up in the background and basically just talk to you about what it is all this stuff entails. All right. So first, why are we here? Shamika, you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. So the reason why we're here is because we want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of what normal sexual development is in children, and to also be able to identify ways that you can talk to your kids about their bodies, about sex, in a way that makes you feel comfortable and helps them to feel comfortable. So we're just going to give you guys just an overview of everything, and just keep in mind that this doesn't encompass everything. If there's more that you need to know, feel free to ask any of the therapists working with your kids.
Definitely, definitely. All right. So first off, let's talk about why it's important to talk to our kids about sex and their body and kind of get that open dialogue going. Number one probably is safety. It's important to establish rules and expectations both in the home and in the world. We want our kids to be confident with their knowledge and use that knowledge to keep themselves safe.
And another thing is we want to make sure that these kids understand what appropriate boundaries are, so that way there's less issues coming about when they interact with the other children in the home as well as other adults in the home.
And keep in mind, foster care kids in particular are going to have problems with boundaries. They might not have learned them in their family of origin, or they might have learned the wrong ones in their family of origin. So it's very important for us to kind of help them establish proper boundaries, safe boundaries, healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And another reason why we want to talk about this is we want to decrease just kind of avoidance behaviors. Talking about sex tends to be sort of a taboo subject. We want to be able to eliminate that and help the kids to be able to talk to you about their bodies and about sex, and it just makes it more normal and comfortable to talk about it down the road.
And then it's safer for them if something were to ever happen, or if they were to have questions, they know that they can report what happened. They know that they can ask those questions, and they'll be more comfortable doing it versus, oh, I can't talk about that to my parent or to an adult, so I guess I'll just go ask my friend, or I just won't tell anybody anything. That's the last thing we want.
Mm-hmm. And that was actually the next point, was we don't want them to learn from a stranger. We don't want them to learn just from, a random Google search or from their friends. We want them to learn from people who actually have some knowledge on the subject.
Definitely, definitely.
And one of the last things is that we don't want them to be misinformed. There's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of misinformation that they may have received, whether that might have been from their parents, from friends, from just society, maybe some of their religious beliefs. We just want to make sure that these kids are as well informed as they can possibly be, so that way they can keep themselves and other people safe.
Definitely, absolutely. All right, you want to go to the next section?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so comfort. Specifically right now, we're actually talking about your comfort level, the person who's listening to this. Yes, the kid's comfort level is going to be important, but we have to start with your comfort level. If you're not comfortable talking about this stuff, number one, that's going to come across to the kid, and number two, maybe there is no number two. I don't know, but it's gonna cross. And
right.
And
if you're not, well, the thing is, if you're not very comfortable with what you're talking about, you're more likely to maybe say things that are myths, or that may be information, or you may just try to get through it as quickly as possible without really paying attention to what they're saying. So you're gonna have a more honest and a more productive conversation if you first recognize how comfortable you are with this.
And yeah, getting across that sense to the kid of this is something we can talk about, and it's not unpleasant, and it's not a bad thing, and it's a necessary thing to talk about. So, all right, how do you build your comfort level?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the first things is how we have on here on the slide is we just need you guys to start with being just kind of honest of wherever you're starting at. Just recognize just what your own comfort level is, what your thoughts about sex is, That way you have a good starting point to say, okay, this is my knowledge, and these are my biases, and maybe these are some myths that maybe I hold on to. And then if you're able to kind of work with that, then you'll be able to better work with talking with the kids.
Yeah, if you're not honest with yourself and go, oh, I can talk about all this, and then you find yourself faltering and the this and the that, that's going to come across. So that's another kind of thing we want to point out is honestly assess your comfort level. It's okay if you don't like talking about sex. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's not necessarily something people talk about all the time.
Right.
So that's okay, and it's just important that you raise that comfort level enough to be effective when talking with the kids.
So some things that can really help would be just to, practice. It gets easier over time. So you can practice, in front of a mirror or in front of other people, just kind of what you want to say. What are the key points that you really want to get across? One of which may be that you want them to feel comfortable talking to you about things. And if they have questions, they can come talk to you. But just practice makes perfect, just like anything else.
Yeah. Reach out perhaps to other parents. Ask them, hey, do you talk to your kids about sex? How have you talked to your kids about sex? And even just in that, you're saying the word sex. You're getting that out of your system.
Exactly.
You might, say, oh, well, what do they call the penis, or what do they call the vagina? And you're using those words with other people, adults, as practice, but not in a weird or awkward way. You're looking to another parent for advice, and who doesn't want to be asked for advice?
Exactly. And another important thing about practicing is that you get to identify what your particular triggers are about sex. You can figure out what it is that you're kind of maybe most uncomfortable with. And then you can really either work on that just kind of on your own. You can even talk to, the child's therapist, what's not, and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this particular aspect, and see if they have any tips, or if they can just help out with those areas that you just find just don't that seem to trigger you too much, if that ever comes up.
Yeah, the really uncomfortable areas. And definitely reaching out to others and reaching out to the therapist, the case manager. Kids always surprise us, you know that, and they're going to ask you something that you're going to be, I don't know how to answer that with this kid. And hopefully a little bit of this conversation will point you in a better direction, but there's always going to be those outlying things that you're going to want to just say, hey, it's fine, I'm going to go ask somebody.
Yeah, and if you find there's things that you're not as aware of, you can definitely try to find some books about the topic. There's certain resources that exist out there that, really lay out very detailed, how to have these conversations and certain facts that the kids may need to know based on what their age and developmental level is.
And also, I was just thinking of this, and I'll throw it in there, being that we're talking about comfort. You might be more comfortable talking about certain things than other things. You might be more comfortable talking to boys than girls, or girls than boys, or girls about boys and boys about girls. So kind of identifying those things and then shoring up your less strong areas are going to be advisable as well. Say, oh, I can talk to a girl all day long, but oh boy, how do I talk to a little boy? And oh, hey, look at that, I just got a curious little 8-year-old in my house, and he's asking a lot of questions. So
right. Yeah. And it may be an age thing as well too. You may feel more comfortable talking to teenagers about it because you're like, okay, this is what you're expected to do with a teenager, but it might be a lot more awkward saying, okay, talking to my 5-year-old, about their bodies, how do I do that?
Especially when they're asking teenage level questions or even higher, yes, which you'll get. So yeah, definitely kind of working out those things. And practice makes perfect. It's down there at the bottom. It's true. It just like any awkward thing, it usually gets easier over time and more natural over time. And that's the main thing you have to remember is the first conversation's not going to be the easiest one in the world, but the 20th one is going to be hopefully a lot easier than that first one. All right. Anything else about comfort?
I think that's all we have on that section.
All right, let's go to, this is how we're organizing the training. We'll just put up the slides for 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 8 years, 9 to 12, and 12 years and up. And, so you can focus on that particular area, but...
Yeah, I just want you guys to keep in mind that these ages are just a general guideline. You have to really take into account what the kid's specific developmental level is. So you may have an 8-year-old, but if they are developmentally more like a 2-year-old, then you have to be, what you do on that 0 to 2 years old range.
and the vice versa. If you get the 7-year-old who talks like a sailor, you take that into account and realize that, hey, they're a little more advanced. You're not going to necessarily talk to them like the age they're talking, but you keep in mind that they're not exactly what their chronological age is or says. So yeah, they're a rough guideline. It's more of a developmental period than the actual age itself. So just keep that in mind for us. All right. First up, 0 to 2 years old. Okay, 0 to 2 years old. The body parts, they do have names. You can say penis, you can say vagina to a 1-year-old, 2-year-old. You can use the cutesy terms if you must, but you want them to be able to accurately identify those parts. And again, this is kind of a safety issue. Like, you don't, if they use, their Pikachu, they might think they're talking about a toy, and by they I mean if they're trying to report something, are they talking about a toy or are they talking about a body part? Now we know versus that.
It's also something that it's okay. It's very common for kids to just explore, and that includes their bodies. So they're going to be, touching their bodies, and to kind of recognize that that's normal, and to let them know that that's something that's normal for them to do as well.
Yeah, and you let them know it's normal by not having a severe, significant reaction when they do it. Don't smack their hand away from their genitals if they're touching them. You can, gently kind of try to distract them, which is what I would recommend in that situation. But you don't want to shame them or start them down the road of, oh, these are bad things, these are icky, naughty things, especially at this age, because at this age it's just very natural that everything's out there. They're going to run around naked. They're going to take their clothes off.
Right. And one thing we probably will mention throughout this training to keep in mind, because this is probably one of those parts that may be triggering for you guys, is to recognize that children do not necessarily see sex in the way that adults do. So for an adult, if you're touching your genitals, has a totally different meaning than per se as a baby that is touching your genitals, or a young child. It's something that they're just either exploring, or it maybe does feel good, but it's not something that they necessarily look at it in the same way as an adult does. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, they're not looking at it sexually or provocatively. It's purely just sensory. It's just, I'm touching this, it might feel good, or I'm just touching this because I'm curious about everything. I touch everything. I'm curious about everything. I'm too. And you can start introducing boundaries about nudity at this point. There's a time and place for it. Again, just going back to the no need to be shaming about it or get super angry about it. I know it can be frustrating when the kid wants nothing more than to take their clothes off, but I guess maybe try to find clothes that are harder for them to take off.
Right.
When you go out, to certain stores in public, and you save the clothes that are easier to rip off for home. That would be my one suggestion on that.
Right. Yeah, so you just wanted to start letting them know what the boundaries are, just keeping in mind there are young kids and they're not necessarily going to follow them, but you just keep, reinforcing that, hey, if you're in a bathroom, this is one thing. If you're out here in a park, or if we're in a grocery store, if you have company over, then that's different. So you just start to kind of let them know kind of what the expectations are, early on. But again, without adding any sort of shame to that.
Yeah. What if they ask about where babies come from? Well, because that's a popular one.
Right.
Let's do where do babies come from if a 2-year-old asks. What do you think?
Well, if a 2-year-old's asking where babies come from, we definitely don't want to do the whole, they come from a stork, through the window kind of thing. It's kind of a cute story to tell, and there's nothing wrong with telling the story per se, but we definitely want them to know that, it comes from, mother gets pregnant, and, comes through the vagina.
Mommy's belly.
And that's what's going on, and more likely that's probably more than enough for a kid this age to kind of, they don't even fully understand it, but at least answers their question and honestly as possible.
Yeah, and you can keep it relatively vague. How does the baby get in mommy's belly? Daddy helps put him. The daddy helps put the baby there.
Right.
How does daddy do that? With his penis. And then they'll look at you very confused and probably walk away, or not.
Right.
Who knows?
They'll get distracted by something else.
Yes, but you can explain to them it takes a mommy and a daddy to make a baby or something like that. But you can be purposefully vague if you like, definitely at this age, not with a teenager.
Right, definitely not the teenager.
Alright,
Okay.
and I think that's about it on 0 to 2. It's pretty
Yeah.
simple with them,
Mhm.
just keeping in mind that, again, I think the bottom line is it's pretty much anything they do is going to be relatively normal behavior. If you start seeing abnormal things, definitely touch base with your therapist and say, hey, this kid is obsessed with XYZ, or they did XYZ, but I wouldn't be terribly alarmed when they stroll into the room naked, holding their genitalia or something like
Right,
that.
right. So in terms of like their sexual health, what we could say the goal for this age group would be for the kids to be comfortable with their entire body and to see each part of their body equally without any parts of shame. If we're able to do that, then great job with that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right, 2 to 5-year-olds, or early childhood, I guess we'd call it, leading up to about elementary school.
Yeah, so again, we're going to continue just when we're talking about the body parts, we use the correct terms, penis, vagina, and kind of explain kind of the basic functions of what they do. This is around the age when kids start to compare themselves with others. So you might want to explain to them, girls have these types of body parts and boys have these types of body parts. And just kind of, same thing as you have, a hand, fingers. It just, these are the body parts that we have.
Yes, yeah, they're not super special body parts necessarily. They're just body parts. But you do start introducing privacy, and some of the parts of the body are private. You don't show these by where everyone can see your fingers. Not everyone should see your penis or your vagina.
And it says that this is a hard one for kids to learn just because, again, in certain areas, it's okay for them to be undressed. Maybe when they're changing their clothes or if they're in the shower, what's not. And other times that's not appropriate. So that's something that they're just going to have to kind of repeat to them, explaining, hey, maybe if it's just us here, it's okay if you're walking around without a shirt on. If we have someone come up to the house, we do need you to have
Yeah. When the plumber's here, we need you to keep your clothes on. Versus, well, if grandma's around, it's okay. She's seen it before. But they'll need reminding. They will probably need a lot of reminding, and and try to do it in a gentle-ish way. It'll be frustrating when you told them to keep everything on, 3 times in a row now. But the first time, don't get all over them. Just remind them gently, hey, remember the plumber's here, you need to go put your clothes back on, type of a thing. So to kind of reduce the potential for shaming and things like that.
And then just talking also just about privacy in terms of, keeping the doors closed and recognizing that, for them to start to understand if they see like the bathroom door closed, to not just walk in, to knock on the door and what's not, and to respect other people's privacy in addition to having their own privacy respected.
Something I just thought of, as far as that, if they're having a problem with that, little visual reminders, like a little hand knocking, or if they can read, probably a lot at this age can't read, but maybe they can learn the word knock to read the word knock, and put a little thing on the bathroom door that says don't forget to knock, or something to that effect. And those visual reminders can be very useful and save a lot of your breath and mental energy. We could at least point to a sign.
Correct. That is very right.
Alright.
So in terms of just kids maybe touching themselves, so this may be a time when you might find your kids playing doctor or other types of games where they kind of explore each other's genital areas. So if you do see something like that, just maybe take a breath, because typically you are maybe going to be triggered seeing something like that. Especially working with kids in foster care, and some kids have had different sexual abuse, but still try to just take a breath, to try to ask calmly what's going on, what are you guys doing,
That's a big part. I'm going to interrupt you real quick there. What are you doing in a non-threatening, you're not in trouble tone can really give a lot of information, because if they are being sexually reactive, you're going to get a different explanation than if they are doing normative exploration, where, we're just doing this, versus I shudder to think some of the answers you can get. But some of the kids who have been sexually abused or have been exposed to a lot of sex in the home, you never know what they've seen and what they might try to act again, or to Why can't I think of the word for that? You know, where you see something and then you do it
Yeah,
again.
they're just copying, repeating it.
Yeah, repeating.
So,
Yeah, repeating what they've seen. But getting that non-accusatory question in could help a lot with that behavior going forward, knowing if it's sexual reactivity or not. So yeah. Where were you, Shamika, when I interrupted you? Just not make a big fuss.
Yeah, just try not to make a big fuss. Just kind of, ask them to get dressed and, try to, have them, engage in some other kind of toy or activity. And then later on, then you can try to talk to them a little bit more about that and, just kind of what the boundaries and the rules are. Because these, the children are in foster care, we do want to make sure that that there's a little bit more boundaries in place than maybe there typically would be if they weren't in foster care.
Yeah, and definitely kind of keeping half an eye out for those potential negative behaviors, but not attributing everything that you see to those potential for negative behaviors. It's a fine line. It's tough. It's not easy. You have a tough job. We acknowledge that. And, it's going to be different for every kid. So, is this good? I want to look at this one real quick. I think we got most of these points here. We're looking at a piece of paper. Talking about babies.
Yeah, and another important thing that sometimes doesn't come up is just helping kids kind of with body ownership, which kind of comes down the line in terms of teaching them consent. A lot of times, we have children and we just tell them, hey, this is your aunt, this is your uncle, this is so and so. Give them a hug, or give them a high five or what's not. And sometimes the kids may not be open to that, and sometimes adults will continue to push for that, and that teaches the child that they don't really have any sort of, ownership over their own bodies.
Yeah, so right to say no.
Right to say no.
Especially about their own body.
So you want to be able to kind of be aware of that and let them know, okay, if you don't feel comfortable, that's okay, that's fine. And then that can help down the road in terms of, being able to help them if they're ever in a bad situation to know that it is okay for them to say no.
Yeah, definitely. You want them about their bodies, about their personal space to be able to say no. There's a lot of times where it can be very frustrating for a child to say no to you, but when it comes to people touching them, you want them to be able to say no. That's very powerful, very important. And you can discuss with them they have a right to say no, and that they should let you know if someone did violate that right in one way or another.
Yeah, and then recognizing and also teaching them sometimes that it is okay for other adults to see them, potentially if they see like a doctor or what's not, that the doctor may ask to touch certain parts of their body, and even in that, recognizing that they still may not feel comfortable with that, and they can still say no or still, request, to have you be there or whatever the case may be that would, help them to feel safe.
Yes, this is definitely an area where you want them empowered. A line here says, we don't keep secrets about our bodies. Secrets can be about surprises and presents. Why do you think they said that?
I think sometimes, they may have been told, depending on any sort of abuse they might have experienced, that certain things are secretive.
This is our little secret kind of a thing, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we don't want them keeping those secrets from us. We want to keep them safe. So it is good to actually let them know we don't keep secrets about our body, and anyone who tells you otherwise is probably a problem, or I guess you wouldn't tell them they're a problem, but that they're wrong and you need to talk to me or whoever me is, whether it's you, the parent, or the therapist, or whomever. All right. So
that's wonderful.
Yes, that brings us to about middle childhood-ish. And I guess this, I'm just reading one of the papers. This is a good time to the paper we're reading from says this is when you want to set yourself up. This age range, 2 to 5, you want to be the person that the child comes to for advice on these types of matters. And we're going to pause right here for a second. Okay, so we're back. Through the magic of, we were gone for a while, but through the magic of recording, that wasn't very long for you. So you want to set yourself up as the youth's #1 source of this information at this time. You want them to come to you because they feel comfortable with you, they know you, they're around you all the time. And, there are a lot of people involved. There's a therapist, there's case managers, there's guardian ad litem, there's all these people, there's maybe their biological parents. So it's not 100% on that, but you're going to at least want to be a safe person, I'd say, to talk to about these things. And you can do that by being comfortable and all the things we just mentioned, being honest, being available, being, again, comfortable. I think that you need to underscore that, because if you're not comfortable, they're going to quickly learn not to talk to you about it. So, all right, and then we'll move on to the next section. All right, 5 to 8 year olds. So this is kindergarten to what, third, fourth, fifth grade, I guess we could include in this area. And we didn't set up our papers again, but that's okay.
Right.
Okay, there we go.
So I guess we can start with some things that you might commonly see in this age group. So things that, some of the behaviors that you might see that are common and normal are, again, they might be touching their private parts. They might be doing this purposefully. And occasionally they might be doing it in front of other people. They may attempt to see other people when they are naked or undressing. This is the age where they might start to mimic dating behavior, like they might start holding hands, they might start kissing. This is kind of when you have that whole, like, oh, you know, Susie has a boyfriend, or, you know, this person has a girlfriend. So that's something that tends to be common around this age as well. They might start talking about private parts and might talking about certain words that they may not fully even understand the meaning of. And they may also, again, just start engaging in different playing activities, you know, playing doctor, you know, show me mine and I'll show me yours, I'll show you mine, kind of thing. So those are some of the common behaviors that you'll see in this age group. That goes kind of in between this. Typically when kids hit about 7-ish though, they tend to be a bit more aware of social rules, and they tend to, in general, start to become more modest and want more privacy for themselves.
Yeah, so that'll kind of be built in, and, you know, it could take a little longer, it could be a little earlier, but you're going to start seeing that around that time, and that wanting to be alone, you know, wanting to shower alone or take a bath alone, or you know, have a lock on their door, and you have to navigate that stuff as best you possibly can. They're definitely going to have more of a vocabulary at this time, understand that there are different parts of the anatomy, that there's not just a penis, there's also testicles and a scrotum and all these words that we love hearing, but that you have to get comfortable with them. They might have some, by the end of this period, I'd say, they're probably going to have some knowledge of the internal reproductive organs. I know they go over it in school: uterus, ovaries, fallopian tubes, urethra, bladder, bowel. They're going to know these things, so just be aware of that and know to be comfortable with it yourself, and also be able to establish boundaries. You know, we don't talk about these things at the dinner table, we don't talk about them at church, we don't talk about them at restaurants, but when you have a question, we can talk about it at home, we can talk about it later. Now's not the right time, but we can talk about it a little later. Remind me, or I'll remind you, or whatever. Again, refusal skills are very important around this time. This is when they should really be able to use them. Like, you want any kid to be able to say, no, don't touch me there, or here, I touched you there, I don't want you to tell anyone, and still tell someone. And again, by doing all the things we've discussed thus far, by being that person, that open person, we're going to get closer to that. Puberty?
Yeah, and it's also good for kids just to realize, and they'll start to explore and understand their own, that bodies come in different shapes and sizes and colors as well. They'll maybe have a better understanding that body parts, certain body parts feel good, feel better than others when they are touched. You know, they'll be able to also just be able to look after their own body in terms of being able to keep their body, you know, clean and keep it healthy.
Yeah.
Things of that nature.
Yeah. And again, some kids are going to be delayed in this, so don't stick to that 5 to 8, but at least push appropriately for it. And by that, I mean not too hard, not too soft. Don't just say, oh, well, that's fine if you don't feel like showering, of course, but you know, don't push them too hard one way or the other to reduce distress and things like that. So we got that. So I get. Our paper does says puberty here, which honestly to me is a little shocking that 5 to 8 year old, you know, puberty is even an issue. You're like, no, wait, don't I have at least like till what, 10?
right. But the thing is that what we're finding is some kids do tend to go through puberty very early. Just it's not very common, but it's also just good for them to know before they have to know. Which is why all this education is important. It's important for them to realize ahead of time, that their bodies are going to change. Because they may have friends that are a little bit older than them that are maybe starting to go through puberty. Like 8-year-old might have a 10-year-old friend or what's not. So it's just important to just kind of get the conversation started. They're going to recognize that people kind of look different based on, what their age group is. And we just want to give them as much knowledge as possible and be able to answer their questions as it comes up.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of an older brother or sister who's just learning about this, who wants to share it with the youth in this age group, basically.
Exactly.
And then hopefully it'll come back to you, and you'll have to kind of rein things in and set them straight and let them know what's what, basically.
Right, exactly. It comes back to that, you want to be the one giving them correct information rather than being misinformed later on by other people.
Yes. What else we got? Those.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Sexual intercourse, you can get a little more into detail here. You can say a man's sperm joins with a woman's ovum or egg or whatever you want to use, and that can happen by sexual intercourse. IVF, in vitro fertilization, is another way. It's probably less common, especially in our kids' worlds. But that you can explain more, just the details, basically, and you don't have to get crazy into it, and you let the kid lead you. They'll ask you. You don't have to sit them down the second they turn 5 or the second they turn 8 or the second they turn any age and say, hey, you need to know how this works. But it's okay if they're asking. It's, I think, hopefully helpful to know that you can have those conversations with them.
Right.
They can handle it.
And sometimes it's good, like, to just recognize just kind of natural situations that can lead to that. Like, maybe they might see a woman that's pregnant, or maybe you guys are watching a TV show and there's happens to be a pregnant person on the show, and they ask questions, oh, how did that happen? And that's an excellent time to just kind of answer those questions about that. And then that way it doesn't have to be kind of this awkward, okay, June 25th, I'm going to decide to talk to, my kids about, about these types of things. So keeping that in mind.
Yes.
We also want to let them know that, as we're kind of explaining it, that, adults do have sex and that it's a normal part of life. But along with that, that is an adult activity that is not appropriate for children.
Yes, and that adults can kiss and hug and touch and engage in sexual behaviors that show that they care for each other and it makes them feel good, but those are adult activities. Yes.
And then keep in mind, again, this might be another thing that might be triggering for you. So, again, if you feel uncomfortable with these types of things, just recognizing where that comes from and, trying to do some practice with that, because that might be a hard thing to be like, okay, adults have sex. We don't really talk. We kind of assume like no one does it, even with adults, like babies just come from nowhere and we don't talk about these things. So it could be very hard to talk to a small child and be like, okay, adults do have sex.
Well, and then from that comes the, do you have sex?
Exactly.
and you might have other kids, and you could say, well, we have children. What do you think?
Right.
And if they start asking for details, you can tell them that's inappropriate, when, how often, things like that.
Establish those boundaries.
Yes, establish boundaries, and you can explain it's not okay, really, it's not appropriate to really ask anyone those questions, that they're personal, and but you understand that they're curious and why they're curious, and you get that, but at the same time, it's important that they know that there's a boundary there, that you don't really ask people those questions.
Exactly.
Masturbation. Some kids will do it.
And some kids don't.
Yeah. But explaining to them it's private, it's something you do alone,
yes.
not around people. There's a time and a place.
So it's appropriate to, let them know where those places are. If you just only say there's a time and a place, they may not know the time and the place. So be specific and let them know, if you have a room to yourself and you're by yourself, or if you're in the bathroom, again, by yourself, at these situations, then that might be okay.
And it's natural and okay to have these urges. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not crazy. They're not wrong for wanting to do these things.
And keeping in mind, you're not telling them, just by telling them that it's normal doesn't mean you're telling them to do it.
Yes.
You're just telling them that this may be something that they might want to do and they might not want to do it. And so you're not saying that, because you also don't want them to assume that if they don't have an interest, that there's something wrong with them too. So it's kind of that flip side.
Yes.
So just keep in mind, like, you might have these feelings, you might have these urges, and you might not, and either way is okay.
Yeah. Another thing here, sometimes people look at pictures of naked people or people having sex, particularly on the internet. You're not going to see a lot of those magazines around anymore, I don't think. And you just tell them that it's not for kids. That's what grown-ups do for fun, and it's not good for kids to do. And you need to discuss that, what they should do if they come across those images. Maybe again, you get the older brother-sister syndrome thing going, and have them hopefully handle that appropriately, and that's tough. I mean, you want to tell them that it's not okay, but you don't want them to scream at their friend, "Oh my God, what are you doing?"
Right.
Or you want to set them up for success in those situations, and to do so is to discuss it, that yes, it's something that people do, but it's not okay for younger people to do. And also probably that they want to tell you or another trusted adult if things like that are going on.
This is another time to explain that there are different sexual orientations, such as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and there's a lot more than that. A lot more than that. And again, this might be something that you might say, okay, this is much too young to talk to kids about. They don't know these things. However, there's been lots of research that show that kids around this age do tend to have sort of an understanding, or at least a beginning understanding of, that.
That people love different people, that there are boys who like boys, there are boys that like girls, there are girls that like girls, and every permutation, every combination you can think of. And now it's in the news more than ever. It's much less taboo to discuss such things. It's much less taboo to be of a different sexual orientation. And we would like, I think, our kids to understand that, and with as little prejudice as possible. Try to leave that out. And hey, sometimes the kids will come with prejudice. And it'll be up to you to kind of navigate that and say, all right, how much do I want to impose upon this kid and say, no, you must love everybody, or no, you must dislike everybody, or various things. It's not easy, but it's an important part of our job with these kids.
Yeah, I mean, kids are learning, they're looking at things or observing things, so, they notice these differences, so it's just important to kind of just start to have that conversation with them.
Yes. And that is at this age mostly what's going to be, and answering those questions, and it's not a full, they're not going to have a doctorate in this by the time they turn 9. All right. Did we cross this out? I think we crossed this out. Oh no, we left a little bit. There's a little bit about love. Kids will, at this age, start realizing that love is a deep, warm feeling for oneself, which is very important. Love yourself, and for others. That there are different types of love. There's romantic love. There's love for your family. There's love for an amazing slice of pizza.
Right, and then you can kind of set certain rules for them, like perhaps, dating starts as a teen. Sometimes you might have, you have kids that will just say, oh, this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend. They copy, what they see from other people, or what they see from TV, or from their older siblings.
Yeah.
So again, it's just, you're just trying to, let them know what the rules are, and establish kind of boundaries as early as possible.
Yes, definitely. What do you think? I was just thinking about this, that let's say a 5-year-old comes home and says he has a girlfriend, or a 5-year-old female, I have a boyfriend, or a girlfriend.
Right.
How would you answer a younger kid versus, I think an older kid, it's okay to say, you're not going to be dating until you're a teenager.
Right.
But there's like the cuteness factor, where you're like, oh, that's cute, they have a little boyfriend, girlfriend.
That's always tricky, because you don't ever want to kill a child spirit too early on.
You want to leave that wonder.
But at the same time, it's like, you don't exactly know kind of what they're doing. Like, your child may have one assumption of girlfriend boyfriend, and whoever this girlfriend boyfriend might be might have a totally different understanding of that, and might be having them do things that they don't want to do. So perhaps the other child wants to do some sort of touching, and your kid doesn't feel comfortable, and you're like, oh, that's cute, so you want to kind of ask them, just kind of, okay, well, how do you feel about it? You know, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing?
What does that mean?
Yeah,
what does it mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah,
what do you guys do
yeah.
now that you're boyfriend and girlfriend?
What do you guys do? How did you decide this person was the one that you wanted to have be your boyfriend?
Yeah.
You know, maybe they'll say they handed me a cookie. Okay, you know, and you can kind of talk to them more about that. But you just want to ask open-ended questions and just kind of have, you know, more of a curious. You know, you can still, you know, laugh and giggle about it because it is something that is very cute. But we want to make sure that that we at least understand kind of what their thoughts and beliefs about what it is to be someone's girlfriend or someone's boyfriend is.
It goes back again to that, use it as an opportunity for assessment, just kind of like how we talked about with the playing doctor or the touching, where you know, you come upon this and you go, oh my god, they're touching. Now it's, oh my god, they say they have a boyfriend or girlfriend, instead of saying, you're not, no, not here. Use it as an opportunity, and you know, you can eventually work in, you know, you're going to be dating when you're a teenager and not before, but use it as that opportunity, like Shamika was just saying, to get more information. What are you guys doing? What are the expectations? And then you can pepper in, well, you know, we're still not touching each other, we're not kissing, you know, things like that.
Exactly. And as long as you feel like it's safe and healthy, you can kind of let them know what those boundaries are. Okay, so you can have, you know, this person be your boyfriend. However, you're not allowed to do these things. These things are, you know, whatever that the case may be.
Yes.
You know. And again, it doesn't have to come from a shaming manner, but just kind of letting them know kind of what the rules are and what the expectations are.
And again, too, I thought about it, then I lost it. Darn. Okay.
It might come back to you.
Yeah, it might come back to
you
me.
know, sometimes you have to kind of read the last thing that you're looking at or what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot it. All right. Okay. Okay. So, support at this age. Just read this again. Again, don't waste. You're still in that zone, that opportunity for you to be their main source of information on these things. And they will get the information from somewhere else if they can't get it from you. And it's not your responsibility. As long as you're giving them the correct information, that's all you can do. You can't really force them not to go to other places, and hopefully it won't inspire them to go to other. They'll be less inspired to go to those other places, but you know, you want yourself to be this person. And going, there's also, again, differences between what a 5-year-old and 8-year-old need to know.
Exactly.
And again, also depending on their developmental level, there's a difference between what a 5-year-old and another 5-year-old need to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's me. They just keep in mind, open-ended questions. What do you think? You know,
Yeah.
what are your ideas on that? And then that way you can just kind of explore just kind of what they've already been taught. You know, because again, we don't know how long these kids have been with you. You know, there's probably a lot of things that they may have been told by their parents or by whoever was raising them that could be, you know, incorrect or based in a lot of shame or in a lot of, you know, that looks at it more as taboo. You know, so just being able to ask those open-ended questions. You don't necessarily have to have them disagree with what they've been taught, you know, ahead of time, but you're just at least giving them additional information, and then over time they could start to say, okay, you know what my foster mom told me, I think I actually agree with that more than maybe what I was, you know, than this other thing that I was told when I was younger.
Yeah, I'm seeing that what foster parent told me is much more true than what Jimmy on the schoolyard told me. Or great point. And if you need to, if there's a lot going on or a lot of questions or it's a sensitive issue, of course, discuss with your therapist. But you could also go and buy some age-appropriate, or not necessarily buy, you can go to the library and borrow some age-appropriate books on sex education if they have so many questions and maybe they're not satisfied. Maybe you're giving the best answers you possibly can and they're still not satisfied, then you can go elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Some kids are very curious.
Yes. And some kids, unfortunately, in this situation too, have learned to not trust adults. They've been let down by a lot of adults, and that's not a dig against you. And hopefully you are part of the process of showing them that adults can be trusted. But these things take a lot of time, and a lot of these kids have been wronged in a lot of ways, so they might trust it more from a book that, granted, an adult wrote it, but if it's on paper, sometimes it's just that much more real to them. All right. That sound about it for that, I think. All right. Oh boy, 9 to 12 years old.
This is when things get really fun, as in maybe not fun, depending on your point of view.
Yes, yes. So.
Okay. So just looking more at some of those behaviors that you might see. So you might see the child, or things that you might hear about. Hopefully some of these things you're not seeing. So there may be more purposeful touching of their private parts, and this should definitely be done in private. They may be engaging in different types of sexual games with other children, such as Truth or Dare, playing family, boyfriend or girlfriend. They may attempt to see other people naked or undressing. They may attempt to listen to or watch sexual content, either on the television, certain video games, the internet, music, etc. They're also more likely to have a desire for more privacy. So you're going to have less issues with, they're not going to be trying to address in front of people, and they're probably going to be more reluctant to want to talk about sexual issues. So this is definitely why you want to be talking about these things early on, because by the time you get to this age, it could definitely get a lot harder if you're just now starting. Not impossible, but it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, it's never too late, and the thing is, though, if they come in and it's something they don't talk about, give it time. As your relationship strengthens, it will get easier for the youth. Hopefully there won't be many scenarios where you need to talk about this stuff right before they're ready for it. I mean, you could get a 12-year-old that comes into your home and says, "Oh, I just had sex," or "I'm going to go have sex," but then if they're saying that, they're probably open to discussing it with you. And coming again from that non-judgmental, at least at first, don't start judging right away, and gather that information. Well, have you had sex before? Would be a great question to ask if they're talking about wanting to have sex with someone or something like that. The sky's really the limit with that information gathering, and the more you can get, the more I think would be helpful to understanding what this kid has done, what they've been through, where they're coming from, and then kind of meeting them there, and then guiding them back to where they should be at that age, which this is still something that older kids do. Yeah.
Yes. And what also be something you might observe is that this is really where you start to see kind of the beginning of kind of interest in their peers and sexual attraction, particularly more towards the later end of the 9 to 12 range. But this is when they start really going through puberty, and their bodies are starting to change for some of them. And then those changes in hormones tend to lead to kind of interest in other things as well.
Yes. Yeah, and there's a lot at these ages. You're going to get a kid, maybe a little girl, into your home who's 10, 11 years old. How do you know if she's had her period yet? Will she just expect there to be feminine products? There's a better term for that. I apologize.
Tampons and things of that nature.
Yeah, will they just expect that? Maybe they'll be comfortable asking. Are you comfortable asking that or providing those things? There's a lot at this age. It's not easy. Boys can have wet dreams. They can ejaculate in their sleep, and they might come and say, I don't know what happened. I don't know what this is. There's something wrong. And you have to take that deep breath and, well, this is a normal thing that happens, and there's nothing to be alarmed about, and move on from there.
Yes, and then also explaining to them that is when fertility happens, once girls are able to start having their periods and boys start to produce semen. So to let them know that they're able to start having babies. So it just you just start to give them a little bit more information. So it's all the information you taught them before, but just in more detail.
Yeah.
And then recognizing that, when you've already talked about sex before, okay, now you can have a baby if you're doing those kind of behaviors.
And that kind of leads into avoiding pregnancy. I don't think we want any of our kids in this age group or above, even many years above, having children. And this can come down to your own views on birth control and things like that, but we want them to avoid having children. And it should be probably, I'm guessing, abstinence first, particularly at this age. But if you can't be abstinent, you have to use protection. They have to know what that is.
again, we want them to learn these things from you before they learn from other people. It's
Yes.
like a lot of times, I think parents can kind of assume that, kids aren't thinking about these things, they don't know about these things, and then something happens. They interact with people that are older than them and that are maybe a little bit more experienced in certain things. And so we want them to have as much knowledge as possible so that way they can make the best decisions and to recognize, okay, this is not something that I want to do, and, to at least know this is how they can keep themselves safe if that is something that they decide to do.
This is also a time when some kids actually might start exploring their sexual orientation, sexual identity, and being able to talk about that, again, is key. Not being judgmental is key.
Definitely.
And just being open and saying, okay, well, and just being open and being able to have a normal discussion about it. And normal's a bad word, but a calm discussion about it.
Right. So again, just kind of goes back to what are your thoughts and beliefs about all these things. Maybe this wasn't as big a deal when you kind of just mentioned, that there are gay people out there when the child was 5 or 8, and now when it's like when you're talking about it now that they're older and maybe they're starting to recognize that they may identify with that, then your own beliefs might be triggered at that point. And so being able to kind of keep that in mind and to seek out support, whether that's from a therapist, case manager, whomever, in order to be able to really help out these kids and have the right conversations that need to happen.
And I've experienced, too, kids a little older than this, maybe 13, 14, will share that they're transgender or they're now gay or they're whatever, and they're forming their identity at this time, and it's very important that they form this identity and they know who they are. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes they rush to make these decisions, and you have to be aware of that. And it's a delicate balance. Again, you want to respect if this is truly their identity. You don't want to be dismissive and say, oh, you don't know what you are, because that could be very hurtful to them.
And that makes it to where they feel like they can't trust you and can't talk to you. And again, the main thing is we want you to be one of the main sources of support and information that they can have.
Yeah. So just being open, but in the back of your mind saying, well, they're still figuring out who they are, what they like, what's going on, and this could change. You don't really need to share that with them as much. But if they are curious or if they are getting nervous or distressed about figuring out who they are, explaining to them that this is a time when you're figuring out who you are, and you have a while to go.
Exactly. Plenty of time. Just ask those open-ended questions. Okay, where did you come to this kind of conclusion? What do you think about that?
What does it mean going forward?
What does this mean? Just kind of just ask questions and say, okay, and let them and thank them for, when they come to you specifically, want to encourage it.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to be like, oh, I'm really glad that you felt comfortable to talk to me, and hopefully we can have this another conversation again in the future.
Yeah, expressing appreciation is huge in general, and when it comes to this, that's a very, very good point. It's just saying that you appreciate that they were willing to come and talk to you about it, and possibly explaining that you understand that it's not easy, but they did it, and you're proud of them for that. Phones, being cyber, even if your child doesn't have a phone, even if they don't have access to a computer in the home or a tablet, or you have good parental controls on yours, believe me, they know how to get into the computers at school. They know how to get past the protections at school. They can be at their friend's house. So having a cyber smart or a protected setup at home does not mean that you don't need to discuss with the youth safety on the internet, which is, of course, not meeting up with people, not sending pictures of themselves. It doesn't even have to be naked pictures, really just pictures of themselves in general. There's plenty of people who would be happy to have fully clothed pictures of our youth, and really getting into a heavy conversation about cybersecurity, being safe on the internet is very important somewhere in this age range, probably earlier than later, I would say, because again, they no matter what, I guarantee they will have access to parts of the internet that they shouldn't, like chat rooms and Facebook, even if you don't think they have a Facebook, a lot of kids have a Facebook.
Yes, I think they all do.
Yes, you have to be 13. A lot of them have several, actually. You have to be 13 to have a Facebook, but all you have to do is click a little box that says you're 13 and enter a date that makes you 13. So they do it at school, they do it at friends' houses, they do it on friends' phones at school. Even if you think the school computers are safe, some of their friends at school are going to have phones, and they do all that stuff on their friend's phone or on their friend's device. So it's very important to kind of have a conversation and then follow up and a plan in place and clear consequences for violating the safety of these plans and all that stuff. It's we could probably do a couple of hours just on that if we really wanted to.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's another good time just to talk about, just kind of what the characteristics of a healthy and respectful relationship, what those things are, in terms of just, equality and just trust and mutual respect. Yeah, and just respecting just the boundaries of others and make sure that their own boundaries are respected as well. We want to make sure that they understand, because they may still be doing that, I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend, so you want to, again, talk to them, okay, what does that mean, what is this relationship like? So just kind of asking them more questions and just kind of letting them know, hey, these are the things that make for a healthy relationship. Unfortunately, this may come up later on, but unfortunately a lot of teenagers do get into relationships that are unsafe and are abusive. So it goes a long way to, as soon as possible, really teach them what it means to have a healthy relationship.
And in our specific case, in foster care, there's a very good chance that their parents had a dysfunctional or bad relationship.
That's correct.
And they are going to, now these youth who saw that, they are actively going to seek out those relationships. So you have to be ever vigilant, looking for that, trying to kind of push them in the opposite direction. Self-esteem goes a long way in this as well. If we get a youth that at least has high self-esteem, they're less likely to be a victim, but then again, I think that makes them more likely to be a perpetrator, which we also have to look out for. We see our kids, often as incapable of such things, but you have to look out for both ends of the spectrum, victim or the perpetrator on the other person. And the last thing we want is to kind of allow that or to let that go unnoticed. So again, as once you get to this age with this subject, it gets infinitely complicated.
It definitely can. And another thing that might make it complicated is that if you are talking about, these types of relationships, these kids are going to maybe for the first time realize that what they saw with their parents is not a healthy relationship. And so, they're going to have to kind of work through that. Work through, understanding, okay, my mom and dad, I love them, but they have this unhealthy relationship, and then what exactly does that mean? So being able to have those conversations with them. You don't necessarily have to say, don't do what your parents do. You don't have to necessarily say it quite like that, but, just let them know, this is what's healthy. If someone's hitting you, that's not healthy, and then they can, make that connection themselves of, okay, well, my parents, maybe they were hitting each other, so that's not a healthy relationship, and then they can decide that they don't want to have that type of relationship for themselves when they are ready to get into any sort of romantic relationship.
Yeah, and don't expect results overnight with this. Their parents did them the wonderful service with those, to really ingraining these things in them, and one conversation's not going to do it. 10 conversations is not going to do it, and they're going to have to feel their way through it. But at least the major safety stuff is the most important. Being physically or emotionally abused is going to be a big thing, and there are things that we can all do if those situations arise. Having them separated at school, making sure there's a ton of stuff. So they're going to hear it, and then they're going to do the exact opposite 9 times out of 10.
Definitely. And this is definitely another good time for those kind of actual conversations. If you guys are all watching a TV show together, after the show's over, it could be a great opportunity to say, okay, well, what did you think about the relationship between those two people? Did you think that was healthy? Would that be a relationship that you think that people should try to be in, or what kind of things did you not like about it, so being able to talk to them about that.
Or, wow, that was something, what would you do if that happened to you, kind of a thing, and it gives you an assessment for where they're at with that, and, they might have the perfect right answer, or they might say, I have no idea, and then you say, well, do you want some ideas? Do you want to talk about it? Because it could happen, I don't know, you should be prepared for everything, right? And, yeah, Alright. Well, since we're morphing, and we've kind of been touching upon most of the stuff in this age group, the teenage years, it's just everything times 100, basically. And we know most of our foster homes don't have teenagers, but for those that do, or those, you never know, you might get one, or one might turn into one into your home. You might see it before your eyes. And teens, it's just, as far as communication, anything goes at this point. You get a new kid, who knows what their vocabulary is, what their knowledge base is, and assessing that's going to be very important. I mean, I've seen teens on both ends of the spectrum who know next to nothing and have really weird, crazy ideas about what sex is, what sexuality is, their body, all that stuff, and then ones who have been there and done it all, unfortunately. But being able to handle that is, at least with an open mind and with a non-judgmental front, even if you're judging in your head, at least coming at them as if, you're not being judgmental and you want to learn a bit more about them is very important.
Definitely. And as you're, if you do have a new kid coming to your home in this age group, you have to establish any kind of boundaries and rules with them when they come in. You don't know what they were taught, so just how you have to teach them, you clean up after yourself, you make up your bed, this is what time you go to sleep, you let them know you're not allowed to bring, your girlfriend or boyfriend home. You're not allowed to...
or maybe you do let them, but they have to stay in the living room. They don't go in the room, alone.
Just whatever those rules are, just making sure that, you figure out kind of what you're comfortable with, what you think, keeps all the kids safe.
What makes sense for that particular kid,
and then just to let them know that these are the expectations that you have, and it doesn't have to be shaming, They may say, this was totally fine in my old foster home, and just let them know this is what the rules are here.
Yeah. And there's a lot of analogies for that. You might be able to come in late at your last job, but this job doesn't tolerate it.
Exactly.
On time is late and early is on time, or whatever it is. Yeah.
right.
But more specific, obviously, to sex and that type of stuff. But and again, too, at this age, it's probably safe to assume that girls have had their period and boys, it's safe to assume in general, I'll go more general, that they've had sex education, but these kids miss a lot of school. They homeschooled sometimes. They were not made to go to school. They skipped a lot for whatever reason. So they only kind of have what they've learned on the street, and again, it's kind of using opportunities for assessment. Maybe they make a comment about something being a certain way, and your mind should light up and go, oh, that's not right. That's totally wrong. But taking that deep breath, a step back, and saying, hey, how do I approach this now that I heard that this child believes that girls can't get pregnant on Mondays or Tuesdays?
Right. Or they can't get pregnant if they're on their period.
Yes.
That's a common myth.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So, and it's using those opportunities to correct them again in a non-judgmental way. Hey, you said that, and I don't know where you heard that, but that's not the case actually. And if you'd like, I could show you information contrary to that or counter to that. But you never know. Sometimes when you attack their beliefs, you're attacking their parents, and you want to be careful, as far as your relationship goes, not to damage that by doing such things.
Which is why it can be good to, have some sort of research that backs it up. And you could even say, a lot of times there's a lot of misinformation out there. So perhaps, if your parents told you that, then someone probably told them that. And that's what they're meant to believe. And so I'm just letting you know that, that according to, this organization, that's not correct. And they can definitely speak to, the therapist what's not about that if they have kind of additional questions or they, additional things come up.
And this is again where utilizing resources like books and things can come into play. And it's like, look, I have 5 books right here, or I can go to the library and take out 10 books that all say the same exact thing that, you know, is contrary to your false belief about this. But hopefully you don't get a lot of that arguing about crazy stuff.
Right, definitely. Mm-hmm.
And again, the more the relationship builds, hopefully the more they kind of believe in what you have to say, and that tends to be the case, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And for those outlying cases, that's when we reach out to your therapist, case manager, reach out to everybody you can, and get that.
Yeah, and definitely reach out to them in terms of if you're not sure what, good resources are. There's a lot of, videos on the internet, people who have kind of, figured out kind of like, here's kind of little snapshots of information that's helpful, whether that is, talking about consent, whether that's, issues with safe sex and things of that nature, and diseases and pregnancy, so if you're just not sure kind of where to start, you can definitely, you talk to, sometimes even the kid's doctor could be good information, or talk to their therapist and just say, I'm not quite sure where to start on this, and then we can definitely try to help you out and put you in the right direction of good resources, articles, books, videos, what's not.
Most therapists, don't feel like you're putting out your therapist or case manager or whomever, because in this field, working in this field, you're going to mostly have these resources on hand after any amount of time. Yeah, so any therapist, case manager, doctor, anyone in this field has gotten asked these questions countless times before. We don't mind answering them. That's why we're sitting here right now doing this, because we've heard it plenty of times before, and there's not much you could there's nothing you can ask us that's going to shock us, and there's really not much else that we haven't come across before.
Very true.
So, all right. Wrapping up, again, don't be afraid to reach out to us, the child's therapists, the case managers. Internet can be your best friend. It could also be your worst enemy.
It sure can.
Or the local library. Definitely books there if you need more info. This is something we actually kind of touched upon, that how every child is different, and will want to communicate differently. This not only for we mostly focused on age, that chronological age. The number isn't so much to where they are, it's just kind of where they are is where they are. But communication styles, some kids will be comfortable discussing, some kids will be comfortable discussing this, some won't, and kind of feeling that out and not pressuring them into an uncomfortable discussion is important.
Someone may want to just read information about it first so they can kind of form their own thoughts and opinions, and then maybe have a conversation with you. Rather than if you just approach them and have a conversation, they may kind of feel anxious or nervous about it, and then kind of give you that deer in headlights look. If you get that look, then you can definitely see that maybe the approach maybe wasn't quite right, or the timing wasn't quite right, and then you can try to make some adjustments from there.
Yes, definitely. You want to kind of respect that kid's comfort level and not add more anxiety to this already anxiety-inducing subject. And again, we want an ongoing dialogue to happen with this. Talking about sex and the body is not a one-time event. It's a persistent dialogue. It's not something you talk about once or twice or once every 6 months. It's kind of something, hopefully, you want to strive for it being something that can just be talked about, that it's okay to talk about it at appropriate times, of course, and that you're the safe person to come to and talk about it. And that's not going to happen right away. It's not going to happen just by you telling them, even though that's a good start. It's a great start to say, hey, look, you're at that age, or even if they're not at that age, it's okay to ask me these questions. But you're showing your comfort level and kind of getting conversations in when and where you can. Actively trying to have those conversations is going to make it a more of a persistent dialogue than simply telling them, hey, if you have any questions, you know where my office is.
Right. And it gets easier. It will get easier over time. Like with more practice, with anything makes perfect. You don't have to be perfect the first time. You don't have to even be perfect the 100th time. We're never even always perfect talking about these things. You just want to make an attempt. And then just, the main thing is just try to help them, just try to convey that you are a safe person that they can talk to. If you can at least do that, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Even if you're not able to, even if you don't feel comfortable talking necessarily about fallopian tubes and vaginas, if you're able to at least say, okay, you can come to me and talk to me if you have questions, and maybe I don't have all the answers, but I can at least get you to the person that does. If that's all you're able to do today, and then work on that, and over time you're able to feel more comfortable and get better at it, then that's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. An answer of, I don't know, but I want to know, and I want to be able to talk to you about this is awesome. Yeah.
All right, so if you have questions, let us know. Hopefully you've enjoyed this wonderful video.
Yeah.
And good luck and keep practicing.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.